Hi. So today I'm gonna give a presentation on this paper written by Yushen Liu, and the topic is categorical assimilation of Cantonese tones by native speakers of Mandarin. So first of all, here's some background information. Cantonese and Mandarin are languages spoken in China. Cantonese is mainly spoken in southeastern China, Hong Kong, and Macau, while Mandarin is mainly spoken elsewhere in mainland China. And there are also like subcategories of Mandarin. This paper focuses on two of them. The first one is Taiwan Mandarin, which is spoken in Taiwan, and the second one is Putonghua Mandarin, which is mainly spoken in mainland China. And one thing to notice is that although Cantonese and Mandarin are all tonal languages, studies have shown that native knowledge of a tonal language does not necessarily facilitate the acquisition of foreign tones. And here are the 6 phonemic tones in Cantonese. The first one, first we can see like there are 3 level tones and 2 rising tones and a low falling tone. For the level tones and rising tones, they're differentiated by the tone height. It has been reported that foreign learners have difficulties in distinguishing C4, which is the low falling tone, from low level tone due to the similar contour shapes, so we can see it from this graph. For Mandarin, it has less tones. In Cantonese, it has only 4 phonemic tones. They are the mid-level tone, the high rising tone, the low falling rising tone, and the high falling tone. They're not differentiated by tone height, but by the contour shape. Taiwan Mandarin speakers and Putonghua Mandarin speakers tend to have different production of M3, which is the low falling rising tone. So for Taiwan Mandarin speakers, they tend to perceive them more as a falling tone rather than a dipping tone. But for Putonghua Mandarin speakers, they tend to perceive them as a falling rising tone. Here's also some information on the entering tones in Taiwanese, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And the reason that Taiwanese is included here is because the participants in this study who speak Taiwan Mandarin are also native speakers of Taiwanese. So that's why it's taken into account. Okay, so back to entering tones. They are tones that have unreleased stops in coded position and are relatively short in time span. Although modern Mandarin has lost entering tones, we can still find them in Taiwanese and Cantonese. So there are 3 entering tones in Cantonese, each corresponding to one of the level tones here. Also, since the paper is kind of built on this perceptual assimilation model proposed by Catherine Best, I'm also going to give a short intro of it. It is a model that looks into how adult listeners perceive foreign non-native phones and contrasts. It also states that people tend to assimilate non-native segments to allophones of the most similar native segments. Some main points are concluded. First, the investigative question of the study is that under possible dialectal influences, how do native speakers of Mandarin perceive and produce non-native Cantonese tones? And also how do they interpret their own native tonal categories? And one of the major findings is that variance in subjects varieties and dialectal backgrounds, even within the same language, so in this case it is Mandarin, may have its influence on the perception and production of non-native tones. And the study also attempts to account for the results on the basis of PAM, which is the perceptual assimilation model. In this study, 3 tasks are used. The first one is labeling, where subjects listen to a series of Cantonese tones and assign Mandarin tonal values. The purpose is to see how native speakers of Mandarin relate Cantonese tones to their native tones. and to see like their patterns of perceptual simulation. The second task is identification, where subjects listen and identify Cantonese tones. The third one is vocalization, where they read out the romanized Cantonese syllables on screen. And there are like two steps of vocalization. The first one is imitation, where the participants are given a set of IPA transcriptions and are asked to read after the recordings. And the second one is production, where they need to produce the sounds themselves, looking at the IPA transcriptions. Here is the data set for the study, and here are the results. There are like 40 graphs in this study, so I picked out 6 of them that contain the most information. Let's look at labeling first. So the first thing to notice is that since Mandarin does not have entering tones, so it's kind of interesting to see like how Mandarin speakers choose tones to represent the Cantonese tones, the Cantonese entering tones. So for example, here we can see the purple ones. Here they are the Mandarin tone 4, which is the high falling tone. And this is a contour shape that does not exist in Cantonese. So it's interesting to see like this tone is almost exclusively mapped to the entering tones in Cantonese, tone 1 and tone 6 to be exact. And it's similar here for the Putonghua subjects. The second thing to see is that for Taiwan Mandarin subjects, when choosing the tone to represent tone 4 in Cantonese, which is the low falling tone, like almost all of them picked Mandarin tone 3, which is the dipping tone. So this kind of conforms to the statement before that Taiwan Mandarin speakers perceive Mandarin tone 3 as merely a falling tone. For Putonghua subjects, we can see like a more diverse selection here for tone 4 in Cantonese. And the last thing to notice here is we can tell from these graphs that tone 6, the entering tone 6 in Cantonese is like the most difficult to categorize, since we can see like they're all random picks of the Mandarin tones. Moving on to identification. Well, overall the performance is not good. As we can see, like the accuracy of identification is mostly below 60%. And one of the reasons is that the participants were only given a brief intro on Cantonese tonal system, so there could be limitations on memory. But still, the results show that the participants have trouble relating what they heard to the new categories in relatively low F0, and so identify them as higher tones. I didn't include the graph here. I should have done that. And also from these two graphs, we can see like Putonghua Mandarin speakers have lower performance than Taiwan Mandarin speakers on identifying the Cantonese tones, especially with the entering tones. We can see that Taiwan Mandarin speakers have much better performance than Putonghua Mandarin speakers, which I think mostly is because like they're also native speakers of Taiwanese, and this is a language that has entering tones, so like they're more experienced, I think. Moving on to vocalization. Overall, Putonghua Mandarin speakers and Taiwan Mandarin speakers gave similar results, but still we can see that it is a little more difficult for them to produce the entering tones here. And Among the three entering tones, tone 3 appears to be the most difficult to produce. This is probably because like they're still not not that experienced with entering tones. And to sum up the results, first, Taiwan Mandarin speakers and Putonghua Mandarin speakers tend to have different perception on the tone contour of the dipping tone, which is M3. Putonghua speakers tend to consider it as a rising tone, as they mainly mapped it to the two Cantonese rising tones. And Taiwan Mandarin speakers consider it as a low falling tone, since they mapped it to the Cantonese low falling tone. The second one is that the presence of entering tones in Taiwanese may help the performance of Taiwan Mandarin speakers on these tasks, especially with the identification task. The third one is Putonghua Mandarin speakers tend to assimilate tones based on the contour shape, while Taiwan Mandarin speakers tend to assimilate tones based on F0 height. And then high level and high rising tones in Cantonese are reported as the most easily recognized tones, since they can be assimilated to a native category. So for example, the high level tone in Cantonese can be assimilated to the high level tone in Mandarin, shown here. And the low falling tone in Cantonese, it is the most difficult to label. And lastly, results from this study all conform to the perceptual assimilation model. Some criticism I have with this paper, the first one is that I didn't see the hypothesis for the study. I'm not sure if the author forgot to include it or what, but I don't see a hypothesis. The second one is that I'm not sure the selection of the participants is the best, because Taiwan Mandarin speakers are all reported as bilingual speakers of Taiwanese and Taiwan Mandarin. So I feel like their performance is almost certain to be affected by the acquisition of Taiwanese, which is kind of biased in this study. I'm kind of curious what the results would be like if monolingual speakers of Taiwan Mandarin were recruited. And the last one is that there's not enough analysis on the assimilation of Cantonese tones by Mandarin speakers. Well, since the title is the assimilation of Cantonese tones by Mandarin speakers, so it should have enough analysis about it. But I didn't see that much analysis. I see more on the comparisons between Taiwan Mandarin and Putonghua Mandarin. Connection to my final research paper is that I would like to do a replication study of this research, but I can't find bilingual speakers of Taiwanese and Taiwan Mandarin, so I can only ask native speakers of Taiwan Mandarin and Putonghua Mandarin to participate in the study. I will use the same method and see if anything interesting shows up. And at last, here's the reference of the paper. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you for listening.